It's the Evening Rancor, the daily podcast from that guy who talks about stuff, John Ford. Any links mentioned on the show are available at johnford.radio. Welcome to the Evening Rancor, the John Ford podcast.
Don't be offended. We're always this way. johnford.radio.
Well, I took the day off yesterday from the Evening Rancor, the John Ford podcast. Had to get some stuff done, and plus I had the house cleaners in. You know, the concept of trying to think and shoot off my big mouth during the show with vacuum cleaners in the background and the dogs barking at the back. As a matter of fact, you can hear my dog with his squeak toy right now. One of my dogs. Vacuum cleaners, the dogs chasing the vacuum cleaners, the Hispanic maids going giddy, giddy, giddy in the background while I'm trying to do the Evening Rancor was probably just not a good idea.
Oh, please.
So I took the day off, and I'm back. Here we are. It's time for the Evening Rancor number 19, the John Ford podcast. Something I wanted to get into today. I've actually been wanting to talk about this for a while, and I've sort of touched on it. But I came across a very interesting piece, which I will take with a somewhat grain of salt, on the Atlantic magazine on their website. I'll put that link up on johnford.radio, so if you want to click on it. This has been making the rounds now for a few days. It seems that there was some research done. Now, I'm one of those people that's always kind of, I don't know, man, research. You can pretty much do any research to prove any darn thing that you want to basically prove. It's pretty easy to do. You just load the research up to prove whatever it is you want to prove, and away you go. This one is kind of interesting, though. But basically, this research showed, and it was a nationally representative poll with 8,000 respondents who were probably very despondent.
Yeah.
31-hour interviews, six focus groups conducted from December 2017 to 2018. And it looked at, issues like what Americans thought about immigration, sexual harassment, different things like that. All this lovely stuff that divides us in this country. It did encompass different types of people, like hardcore conservatives, the far right, the far left, the ups and downs, the in-betweens, the overs and across. And it came to the conclusion that a full 80% of people in the United States believe that, quote, political correctness is a problem in our country.
Yeah.
I prefer not to call it political correctness. I prefer to call it really, what it is. It's tribalism. It's putting yourself in a group and making your entire life focused on that group, otherwise known as identity politics. And this is the political direction that the left has been heading for quite some time. I just find it so strange that the left has abandoned traditional liberalism. There was even a piece I read the other day, and I believe it was on a conservative website, that basically said it's important that the right, that the Republicans pick up traditional liberalism because the left has abandoned traditional liberalism. So anyways, a full 80% believe that political correctness is a problem in our country. And you would say, well, yeah, but they didn't poll the young people. But wait, even young people are uncomfortable with it. 74% between the ages of 24 and 29 and 79% under the age of 24 are uncomfortable with political correctness. But then you might say, oh, wait, you didn't talk to any people of color. Well, that's not quite true. According to the research, now take that with a grain of salt, political correctness is a problem across the country. 79% of them share this sentiment. Instead, 82% of Asians said it's a problem. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the Supreme Court with the Asian students suing Harvard. What happens there? Hispanics said 87% of Hispanics said it was a problem. And 88% of American Indians, they are the most likely to oppose political correctness. According to the article in The Atlantic, they interviewed one 40-year-old American Indian guy in Oklahoma, and he said in the focus group, according to the report, well, it seems like every day you wake up, something's changed. Do you say Jew or Jewish? Is it a black guy, African American? You're on your toes because you never know what to say. So political correctness in that sense is scary. And according to this research, yeah, this identity politics thing is kind of scary to a lot of Americans. And as I said, let's not call it political correctness. Let's call it for what it is. It is tribalism. It is taking what you identify yourself with and that particular bubble, that bubble group that you feel represents you, whether it's a black person, a Hispanic, or an American Indian, or a homosexual, or a transgender individual, or women, or men. And the tribalism begets tribalism. Once you start down this road of identity politics, once you start down this road of tribalism, it just creates more tribalism because, and you even see this now, that men, white men, are finding themselves threatened. And of course, the far left makes fun of that. But it's a natural reaction to the tribalism of the other tribes. You create this tribalism and it just creates more tribalism. It's really a very dangerous road we've gone down. And it's just so strange. It used to be the right that were causing the problems with unclean political thought. But now we've entered this new era of the far left, which is basically the left these days, creating all this tribalism and creating this out of their political movement of identity politics. If you look at this report on the surface of it, it seems pretty obvious that a lot of people are really uncomfortable with this. I would argue that this is one of the reasons why the Democrats end up losing elections, because they're basing so much on this identity politics and this tribalism, which has bubbled and oozed up from our universities into society. And they see, women pounding at the doors of the Supreme Court and screaming and rioting in the streets by Antifa and creating this huge mass of tribalism. And then you have the right that pops up creating their own tribalism, and you end up with just these tribal bubbles everywhere. Violence begets violence. But I would also argue that you can take some of the stuff in this particular report with a grain of salt, like I said at the beginning, because you have the Republicans, for example, they'll be all upset about political correctness and this tribalism, and they'll be upset about protecting freedom of speech. But if you really kind of dig down a little bit, you see for the most part, they're just interested in protecting their freedom of speech. They're not interested in protecting everyone's freedom of speech. But it's kind of due to this whole tribalism bubble where we've all created our bubbles and we want to protect what we want to protect, but we don't want to protect these same protections for everyone. So even though a large majority are decrying political correctness, that doesn't mean that everybody's looking for a fair playing field. You'll have one side that will denounce this political correctness, we'll call it the right, but they still want to suppress what they see as offensive or harmful speech. And a good example of that would be burning the American flag. The Supreme Court's already weighed in on this, and I believe you could argue directly from the Constitution that you should have the right to do that. That is freedom of speech. I'm not a sports guy. When I was younger, I used to watch sports. I used to love football. Over the years, I just don't care about it anymore. I have my reasons, but my reasons are just kind of personal. They don't really have anything to do with politics, or I just got bored with it. It just wasn't as interesting to me as it used to be. But last year we had this whole big kerfluffle. What a great word. We had this whole big kerfluffle about, Colin Kaepernick and all these guys, taking the knee on the football field. I think they have the right to do that. Do I necessarily agree with it? No, but I would stand up for their right to do that. And is this really something we should be upset about? And if you don't like it, don't watch the football game. It's as simple as that. If you don't like what I say, go listen to somebody else's podcast. It's as simple as that. Vote with your ears. Vote with your eyeballs. Don't vote by taking somebody else's rights away. Let them kneel. How is that really hurting you? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say you've got to be patriotic. I don't see that amendment anywhere. The amendments are all about freedoms of individuals. They're all about protecting individuals from the heavy hand of the government. I certainly agree that these football teams are corporate entities. If they want to fire their people for taking a knee, well, then by God, they should be able to do that. Is that censorship? Yeah, probably, but it's still their right. It is their corporate right, if you want to call it that. And I still say that the radical left part of the Democratic Party, which has taken over the Democratic Party with their slant on political correctness, their movement towards tribalism, their identity politics is the number one reason why they have lost elections, whether you take this survey with a grain of salt or not, because people are turned off by it. People are more turned off by this inane speech over tribalism and political correctness and identity politics, and they are turned off because they know that tribalism is a dangerous road and it leads to really bad things, and tribalism begets tribalism. Just one more example of this silly stuff before I blow this popsicle stand today. I was at an event a few months ago, and I've gone a couple of other times, but it was basically a meetup at a pretty cool bar here in Austin, Texas, for a group of mental health professionals. I'm not going to go into the background of why I was there, but it was for a group of mental health professionals that are supportive of the LGBTQXY LMNOPZ squared tribe here in Austin, Texas. And I would, being the very liberal individual that I am, being the very libertarian individual that I am, consider myself an ally of many of their causes. I mean, I honestly believe people ought to be able to live their lives however they want to live their lives. It's just none of anybody else's business. But I was having this conversation with someone, and I said, well, what kind of therapy do you do? And I forget what the actual answer was. I do therapy for people that have been kept down by the man. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? She says, well, by the patriarchy that have been destroyed by white men. And I looked at her and I said, I'm a white man. And I wasn't going to get into some big argument with her, but I tried to deal with it from an emotional, personal level. And I said, well, you obviously, this is disturbing to me because you see me as the enemy. And she says, well, yeah, you are the enemy. Whether you realize it or not, you're the enemy. Obviously, I was there as an ally to this group of folks. I mean, I was not there to create a problem. I was there to, enjoy their company and have a nice time. If I'm attending an event like this and I am made to feel as if, even though I'm an ally, I'm an enemy, how does that endear me to them? You would think that they would be embracing people who are their allies, as opposed to saying, no, man, you're a white male. You are the enemy. How does that make me feel? Like I want to create my own tribe. But thankfully, I know better.
This program is for re-educational purposes only. Resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is probably intentional. Contents under pressure, use only as directed, some assembly required. Void where inhibited, batteries not included, use only as directed. If confusion persists, consult your physician. Driver does not carry cash. This disclaimer is subject to change without notice.
JohnFord.radio